Welcome back to a special episode of the Worst Is Yet to Come podcast. I'm Andrew, and I'm joined with my co-host Harry. How's it going, buddy?
What's up, man?
Hey, so this is going to be a special episode for Remembrance Day here in Canada. It's just a quick little, I don't know, kind of summary of the history of kind of Remembrance Day and how it comes from World War One. A little bit about World War One. I'm really looking forward to this episode because I think Remembrance Day is an important topic for everyone, especially the younger generations that are so far removed from this kind of stuff. So I'm gonna start off by reading the poem "In Flanders Fields," which every at least 90s kid of my generation will kind of remember in school. We were taught in elementary school this poem. We read it over and over and over again about this time of year. So I don't know. Have you heard this before, Harry?
Yeah, I have. I think, yeah, I've heard it before.
All right, cool. So I'll start off. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely sing. Fly scarce heard amidst the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Now that was written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, and he was a Canadian poet, physician, author, artist, and soldier during World War One. Notably, he was a surgeon during the Second Battle of Ypres, and there's various legends around kind of him writing this poem, and the real inspiration and the most popular one is the day before he wrote this poem, one of his closest friends was killed in the fighting, and he was buried in a makeshift grave with a simple wooden cross, and wild poppies were already beginning to bloom between the crosses marking the many graves. So I think as a surgeon, he dealt with a lot of death, loss, and tragedy, and this kind of poem just comes from all that, especially seeing his friend's grave. And I believe it was 1917 he died of pneumonia. So yeah, he didn't
Yeah,
he didn't survive the war.
yeah, that's crazy to see or to think about the horror of, like, especially like World War One, like, like the one of the first kind of like modern wars, and the extent of,
It's like
how,
industrial
like,
war,
yeah, like, and to kind of see to think about the contrast between seeing the horrors of war, and then, in between these graves of these, like, young men, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, you know, like
fresh
the
flowers popping up.
like these, yeah, some of the most beautiful flowers on the fucking planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like those poppies are really,
yeah.
are beautiful flowers.
It's like a stark contrast, the death and destruction of like the beauty of life and creation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that captures it pretty well. So you want to go into a brief explanation, kind of in this context of like Remembrance Day about World War One.
Yeah, so Remembrance Day is um it's more so a kind of British holiday, the British and the Commonwealth nations. That's on November 11th. It commemorates the ending of the armistice for First World War on at 11 a.m. on November 11th, in 1918. Americans have a Veterans Day on that same day, but that's more so where Remembrance Day is meant to remember the soldiers that lost their lives and that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Veterans Day in the United States is more to uh, celebrate veterans in general, and our holiday that's similar to Remembrance Day is actually in May, in Memorial Day. But that's kind of what Remembrance Day is, if anyone wasn't aware. And so, as you're saying, I wanted to give it like a brief explanation about the First World War and its the importance of it and the cost of it to, the British Empire, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the other Commonwealth nations. So the United Kingdom was one of the Allied powers. The Triple Entente, and that was France, Britain, and was it the United States?
Yeah, the United States when
Yeah,
they did enter. Yeah,
yeah. The British forces fought on multiple fronts, including the Western Front in Europe. So that's like France and Belgium and things like that, and also campaigns in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia with their colonial powers, and in the Middle East against the Ottomans. Um, the
famously with
war,
Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, the war effort was very costly to the British economy and society. Um, just massive loss. England's an island, so and Britain is and like England is uh, the British Isles are the central hub of the British Empire at the time, and the fact that um, the German U-boats were very much the same kind of way in World War One. They were able to kind of very heavily put a strain on the British economy by attacking shipping lanes and things like that. And then just like the rapid social and political changes that accompany any like major conflict. Um, the British introduced conscription to maintain the necessary troop levels, because as we were saying, the war was very costly from the start. Um, the war, in social change, and notably led to increased opportunities for women in the workforce. It also contributed greatly to the suffragette movement, which eventually gained the women the right to vote. The Battle of the Somme in 1916, the Battle of Jutland in 1916 were among the most notable engagements involving British forces. These are just massive conflicts.
actually,
And
the
did you
Queen's
want to?
father, the future king, was actually in the Battle of Jutland in the Royal Navy.
Yeah, I wanted to.
He was a gunnery officer. But yeah, sorry, it's a little off topic.
No, 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 no. It's on topic, but I wanted to. We didn't mark it down in the notes, but I wanted to emphasize the amount of like the casualties, just you know, because it emphasize that that's like a massive battle. So the Battle of the Somme took place from July 1st, 1916 to November 18th, 1916. And in that battle, around 420,000 British soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing. Um, so just insane.
Well, on the first day of the Somme, the pretty much entire Royal Newfoundland Regiment was decimated. Doing their frontal assaults on German trenches, and to this day, in Newfoundland on July 1st, which is also Canada Day, our national holiday, it's their kind of provincial Remembrance Day for all those Newfoundlanders, because you got to remember Newfoundland was its own colony at the time, separate, but it was still attached to the British military, and it's a very small population, and a majority of the men signed up to fight, and that's a huge chunk of their population was just killed first day of the Somme, wiped out. I think they had like a 2-3 dozen men return over a full battalion going over the top. So
Jesus.
it's a horrific day, and the casualties for the first day of the Somme are like the largest loss of human life in war in one day in history.
Yeah, I got it right here for the British side at least. Fuck, this is in one day. The July 1st, 1916, like you were saying, one day. In one day on the British side alone, 19,000 were killed.
Yeah,
Like not wounded, so, just killed outright.
straight up killed. Yeah.
19,000. Jesus, that's insane.
Yep. It's and that's why, like I said, we need to remember. And going back to what I said about the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, on the first day of the Somme, uh, 780 men went over the top, and only 110 returned. And then 68 of those were available the next day for roll call. So
God, so like the other guys, so
the
40
whole
were wounded.
the whole regiment was essentially combat
Decimated.
ineffective. Yeah, they were
Yeah,
decimated.
yeah.
93% casualties. And this is kind of a thing that happened all across the first day of the Somme, was just mass casualties. So it's just keep that in mind when we're talking about how costly this war was. And the thing too is like during this time they have things in the British Isles called PALS battalions. So you and your buddies from the same village or town would sign up together and get put into the same battalion. So on the first day of the Somme, a whole village worth of young men would get wiped out, and a whole neighborhood of mothers would be getting letters that their 18, 19-year-old sons were all killed.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Uh,
If you
Fuck,
live in
dude.
if you live in a small village of, let's say, like a couple hundred people, you grew up with the same 30 guys, you all join up together, all 30 of you died on the same day. That whole village, their whole youth population of men was wiped out on that first day. And this happened all across the British Isles. So this is like some serious, devastating losses for obviously the military, but also the families and like the people. Like that's what whenever we talk about history, we always talk about, oh, this number happened, or this battle. But if you think about it on an individual level, this was someone's son, someone's brother,
Yeah.
maybe someone's husband. Like this affected more people than just like the one person that died.
Right. Like it's and like I like to like point out like when we're talking about that, like even we kind of we try to emphasize the loss and that kind of thing, but even we end up mentioning the numbers because it's just so staggering and it's difficult not to. But think like just the first day of the Battle of the Somme, 19,000, it was like 19,240 men of the British Empire lost their lives. Think of every one of those as like yourself, and then imagine all of the things you're going to do, all the things you have done, all the people you're going to interact with, all the people you're going to love and care for, and then that's nothing now.
I
That's the extent of like everything they were going to be, they could have been, is gone now.
Well, that reminds me of the letter we read in our Operation Market Garden episode, written by that young man who knew he was
Yeah,
going to die, and he
yeah,
thanked his mother for his life, and like saying that it was an honor to live. I want to thank you for being my mother, and I know I'm going to die. And this happened to 19,000 men.
in a fucking day, dude.
It's devastating. So yeah, sorry, Harry. Carry on, man. I just wanted to kind of say something about that.
Oh yeah, and we mentioned the Battle of Jutland too. Like that's the the we mentioned it like in passing, kind of, but that's the largest naval battle that's ever fucking occurred.
Yeah, it was.
Like by a large margin.
Oh yeah, this is definitely something I would love to talk about in a future episode. There's
Yeah,
just so many things that are on our kind of hot plate or our back burner of episodes to talk about. So
yeah. But so we won't elaborate too much on that. But just that was the largest fucking naval battle ever, and like you said, what the future King of England fought in that battle, right?
yeah. The Queen Elizabeth's father
Yeah.
was I think he was a gunnery officer. I'll have to look into it, but
Yeah. Um. So moving on. The wars end in 1918. Brought relief, but also the changes. All these communities, all these like fields of work and everything. They had to like come to terms with oh, there's not men to do this work anymore, or like these like you're saying these entire towns would be like okay, so all the men are gone. You know what I mean? So what are these? At the time, like what do these like young women do? You know, like they have to move. Like there's nothing to do. Like um, and then just the men coming back. You know, the physical and psychological wounds suffered not only by the soldiers but also by the people. Also, it was something they had to deal with. I'm going into Canada specifically because you're Canadian. A lot of our listeners are from Canada. Just wanted to emphasize this, but at the time, Canada was a dominion of the British Empire. So by the by Britain, going to war, it automatically drew Canada into the war because they were a dominion. Um, Canadian forces made significant contributions to the war effort, particularly the Battle of Vimy Ridge in 1917, where they achieved a major victory.
which is something I do want to talk about because Vimy Ridge is considered the birth of our nation. This is
Yeah.
kind of the thing that
Was
put Canada on the map.
was
So,
it it was Arthur Curry, right? Was the guy?
um,
Or
I
was
know
that
he was a divisional commander during Vimy Ridge, and then he took over the Canadian Corps after.
okay. Um we should definitely do an episode on him.
Oh yeah.
Um the okay, so just as with, it's like as with Britain itself, the war had a massive transformative effect on Canada. It experienced rapid industrial and economic growth due to wartime demands, and its contributions to the war effort bolstered its sense of national identity. Like you're saying, like you're saying, that was like considered like the birth of Canada, essentially. Which it's the pride that Canadians felt because it was Canadians, what I mean, that were in that battle and that won that battle. I mean, it didn't feel like it was a British victory, and it felt like a British victory, but in many ways it was a Canadian victory. You know what I mean?
It was the first time all of the Canadian divisions fought together in the same corps side by side. And when they did that is when they achieved the victory at Vimy Ridge, which was a tough kind of mission or
Yeah,
operation that I think the French have tried and the British tried, and then the Canadians gave it a shot.
damn dude. Uh, okay, so as with all the other powers, Britain included, the war exacted a heavy toll on the British population. More than 61,000 Canadians lost their lives, and many more suffered injuries. That's 61,000 out of would you just? It was the population was
Seven,
7 million at the time.
yeah, 7 million Canadians were in the country, so that's almost 1% of our population was
Just
dead.
directly killed. Yeah, and then having probably twice as many wounded. Right.
We had 150,000 wounded,
Yeah, it's like
and then
3% of the population.
and we had 1 million men in uniform out of the 7 million population at the time. So one out of every 7 people in the country was in the military.
Jesus.
Yeah, so we pretty much mobilized our entire population.
Jeez. So after the war ended, or the experiences of the war highlighted Canada's growing autonomy within the British Empire itself. And after the war, Canada was actually a signatory of the Treaty of Versailles in its own right, separate from Britain. The sacrifices of Canadians during World War One are remembered and honored annually on Remembrance Day. As we were saying. Going to talk about the more of the after effects of the war as a whole. Um, the war lasted from 1914 to 1918. Um, the estimated civilian and military casualties during the war is around 40 million.
That's on
And
both
that's
sides.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's on both sides. This is all this stuff is on both sides. So that's from bombing, disease, that kind of stuff. Military deaths was approximately 10 million military personnel lost during the course of the war. That's on both sides. The Allied powers lost, which is Britain, France, and the United States lost about 6 million, and the Central Powers, which is Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, lost about 4 million. And again, this is from battles, military operations, and
It's
sickness.
all rough numbers too, because it's kind of hard to calculate.
Yeah,
Different sources all over the internet, but this is just the general idea to get the scale.
yeah. And then tens of millions of civilians, uh, lost their lives directly by the war. Again, from bombings like the most famous one in World War One. They couldn't really do the long range bombing except through the Zeppelins.
It's a
That's
lot of
insane.
also like a lot of like famines and
Oh
kind
yeah,
of people displaced, all that kind of stuff, like
yeah,
disease spreading. Like
yeah. Like
if
these battles took place on like the French countryside. Like what I mean, like the French or like
Belgium,
German or yeah,
90% of Belgium was occupied by the Germans. So like millions of Belgians were displaced or living under German occupation.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, God,
I
you'll
think
make us the waffles now.
uh,
Jesus.
I think another important thing is kind of the emotional and psychological like ramifications of the war.
Absolutely. Yeah, shell shock and all that, like PTSD now is what they call it.
Yeah. And
Um,
a lot of psychological trauma was extended to civilians, like we were saying, that were living under occupation or living near the war zones.
yeah, yeah, because it was the first, not the first time, but like it was the first modern kind of extent of where, like these, bombings affected people, and the closeness of conflict to civilian populations was different now in this kind of new modern industrially charged conflict. Um, the casualties, both in terms of lives lost and the people that kept on living, um, living forever changed, had a lasting impact on families, communities, and nations altogether. Uh, World War I's devastating human cost is a somber reminder of the horrors of war and has influenced global politics, society, and culture in the years that followed, um, including the largest conflict ever, World War II, to a very large extent.
Yeah, just long-term ramifications from this war essentially caused and snowballed into World War II.
Yeah. You wanted to, like all that being said, we like to, where we can, talk about if our family had any kind of involvement in this kind of stuff. I know we talked about, I think one of your family members in, like World War II. We were going through the one of the episodes. I think it was.
Yeah,
Um,
just want to, like, as we're talking about like the death and destruction, I kind of want to highlight something that I've kind of heard through my grandmother, who is like kind of like the family historian, and it
yeah.
was her uncle, which was my great great uncle, Private John McNamara. He was born and he lived in Paisley, Scotland, and he joined the Second Battalion of the Gordon Highlanders in 1915 at the age of 20, along with his brother Thomas McNamara, and essentially um, John McNamara's first engagement was at the Battle of Loos in September of 1915. Fought through it all the way into October. The following year, he fought on the Somme, which we talked about a little bit, the extent of like how dangerous and deadly it was. I would kind of want to get into that a little bit more on another episode, but a lot of crazy stuff on the Somme, especially the Gordon Highlanders. There's the war diary of the regiment, kind of breaks down what they did day to day throughout the Somme and their casualties they took. And by the end of it, I think it was like 400 killed out of like the 700 or 800 men of the battalion. So about
Jesus.
50% casualties roughly for the second battalion.
Damn.
And then the following year, he fought through and survived the Battle of Arras. And exactly 1 month after the battle ended, June 16th, 1917, he was killed. And his body was never found. His name is on a memorial wall with others whose remains were never found at the Arras Memorial at the Faubourg Amiens British Cemetery in the town of Arras. So the cover photo for this episode is going to be a photo that I got from the War Graves photographic project. So essentially, you can email the Imperial, I think it's the Imperial Graves Ministry or whatever, and you kind of give them the information of your family member, their service number, and they'll actually tell you where your family member is buried in one of these Imperial graves. So unfortunately, like I said, John's body was never found, so his name is kind of on the memorial in the background of this photo on a wall. And so the British War Graves Ministry or whatever, they sent me 3 photographs. So they took a picture of his name on the wall, they took a picture of the cemetery, and they took a picture of like kind of the little memorial writing on the wall. And you make a small donation, and they send you these photos. I think that was kind of great. So I kind of did that, and I'd like to go to this cemetery eventually when I do go to Europe, kind of pay my respects. So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah. So like on this kind of thing is like Canadians began to commemorate their veterans and war dead as early as 1890 on Decoration Day, which was kind of observed on June 2nd as a anniversary of the Battle of Ridgeway against the Fenians in 1866, which is another thing we want to talk about, the Fenian raids. And then they kind of shifted it between 1900 and 1800 to being held on the 27th of February to mark the Canadian victory over the Boers, the Battle of Paardeberg. Because prior to World War One, there was the Boer War. Canadians actually sent a lot of men to fight in the Boer War, so this kind of covers that. And then the first actual armistice day across the whole British Empire, King George kind of said in 1919 that we're going to observe it on November 11th. And then eventually in 1921, after the Canadian Parliament kind of said, like, hey, this is the official day. Like the King said in 1919, but the Canadian Parliament kind of made it a statutory kind of thing then. So how Canadians kind of do Remembrance Day is as soon as World War One ended, all these veterans got together and they formed the Legion, right? Which is a group of them to get together. They have a couple beers, they organize these kind of things. So all across the country, there was a whole campaign about building cenotaphs. All across the country, memorials were built everywhere. All these guys in World War One who lived through this wanted to remember their fallen brothers, right? So all across every small town in Canada, every city in Canada has a cenotaph. And on Remembrance Day, that's where the Royal Canadian Legion usually organizes these Remembrance Day ceremonies at these cenotaphs, where members of the community, members of the military will lay wreaths. They'll play Last Post, and then they'll have a moment of silence at 11:11. And then I kind of go to these ceremonies in the Ottawa area, so there's usually a flyover by the Air Force. If you go to downtown Ottawa, it's a whole televised event. The Governor General is there, the Prime Minister of Canada is there, all important people in Canada are there. They're all laying wreaths at the National War Memorial, which is downtown Ottawa. They always have what do they call them? The Silver Cross Mothers. So they select one mother whose son was killed in the service of Canada to lay a wreath on behalf of all the mothers. And so they just do a full ceremony, 21 gun salute. Like I said, it's all televised, and I think it's really important for Canadians. Like it's not an official holiday. Like it's not a you get the day off work holiday, but if it's on the weekend, you need to go to remember these people. If it's during the week, you need to stop what you're doing at 11:11 to remember these people. I've been in the workplace the last 10 years, right? Any day that is kind of had a Remembrance Day during the week, we shut the shop down. We listen to the ceremony on the radio. We stop at 11:11. We pay our respects. I think that's a really important thing for Canadians to do because, like, besides the whole token, go to a ceremony, kind of, make a post on social media saying, hey, lest we forget, remember the guys that died, you need to live every day with purpose and passion and be thankful for your freedom. You have the opportunity to live in a free country and live free for all those people who didn't have a chance to live. All these people didn't have a chance to have families. They didn't have a chance to contribute to the greater good of the community. And we need to do that as citizens of our country. So you need to do it for them and remember the sacrifice because it's really important that the things that they died to protect, that we keep going and we don't let this country fall into ruins. Okay? So just keep that in mind, whoever's listening. For the love of God, please do that. And I think Harry, you got something to finish us off with.
Yeah, we wanted to finish. Both me and you are Christians, and we like to. We found one particular verse in the Bible that comes, it exemplifies like kind of the duty of a soldier and that kind of thing, and like how they should be in as a soldier and in their faith and that kind of thing. And it's First Corinthians chapter 16 verse 13, and it's be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. And I think that should be like underlined in every like Christian soldier's Bible. Like it exemplifies, very much, how they are in their life as a soldier, and how they should be in their faith.
Yeah, 100%. It's perfect to remember that, keep that in mind. And, on that note, I want to thank everyone who's been listening for this special episode we kind of put together for Remembrance Day. So, take your time, take your moment at 11:11, moment of silence. Remember the people that died. And on that note, we'll finish off the episode. I'm not going to plug our social media or any of that because this is not the time for it. So thanks for listening.
Yeah.